We already have a top United States Attorney's Office employee in Tennessee quitting immediately out of the Nashville office after the Department of Justice did this very politicized indictment of Abrego Garcia. We're all aware Abrego Garcia was the migrant from Maryland who was sent to the concentration camp in El Salvador, where he was rotting away. The Supreme Court said facilitate his return. The Trump regime claimed that they can never facilitate his return. It was impossible. Apparently, it is possible. They were just waiting to get an indictment on him. So they bring him back into the United States from El Salvador after saying that can't be done. They indict him immediately. It's a 2-count felony indictment. One of the count is conspiracy on trafficking. Another is a trafficking count. And it basically is alleging that Abrego Garcia was part of a group of people who would bring in undocumented migrants into the United States for money and then would drive them into different locations where they would, I guess, eventually work and live in the United States. So this guy named Ben Schrader, he's the former chief of the criminal division for the United States Attorney's Office in Nashville, worked there for 15 years. 15 years. That means under lots of Democrats, Republicans, Democrats. Under the first Trump administration, Biden, Trump, Obama, he was there through it all. He resigned immediately when this indictment dropped against Abrego Garcia, in what many people are suspecting because the Department of Justice totally politicized this thing. What happened was Abrego Garcia was pulled over in Tennessee in 2022. He was in, I think, a Suburban. I think there was about 8 or 9 other guys in the car. He was questioned when he was pulled over. What are these guys doing in your car? And Abrego just said, hey, we're going from one job site to another job site. I think he said, I picked him up in St. Louis and we're going somewhere else. And he got a warning from the police that pulled him over. And that was kind of the end of it. That was the encounter. So now 3 years later, that is like the main hook when you read this criminal indictment on the trafficking and conspiracy to commit trafficking. When you actually get into the meat of okay, well, what are you saying he did? There's lots of broad language, but the incident that they specifically talk about was that 2022 incident. The odd thing, and I think a very scary and dangerous thing, is that when you had the Attorney General Pam Bondi give a press conference, she basically started linking him to child sex trafficking, murders, and things that there's nothing of that in this indictment. So let me just show you what she said, because I think it's very problematic. And Harry, you've been you were a leader at the Department of Justice, Main Justice in Washington, D.C. You were a United States Attorney in the Western District of Pennsylvania. So you know how this is supposed to happen and not supposed to happen. But let me show you what Pam Bondi said first. Play this clip.
I have 2. One's on topic, one's off topic. Maybe I misunderstood you, but you were mentioning, that he had some involvement in a murder, or was connected to groups that had, involved with this other smuggling ring. But to be clear, the only charges he's facing right now are the human smuggling charges. Just that's the one offense. But the other things that you have talked about are not actually in the indictment.
No, co-conspirators allege that. And we were clear to say that he is charged with, it's not only very serious charges of alien smuggling.
And then I'll show you this other clip of Pam Bondi here. Let's play the other one too.
Involved in that, human trafficking, not only in our country, but in our world, is very, very real. It's very dangerous. And as you saw recently in Virginia, the arrest we made of the MS-13 member, unrelated to this, we learned at that press conference, that's where they bring young children into our country and they start grooming them at middle school age to become MS-13 full-fledged members, commit violent crimes throughout our country. It is highly organized.
So you see, Harry, how she conflates an entirely separate incident brings it into this indictment. I want to get your reaction to the fact that the top prosecutor, one of the top prosecutors there, quit. What does that tell you? And what do you make of just even a press conference like that, where she's bringing in things that are not in the four corners of this indictment?
Let me start there, and I'll try to kind of keep under control, because she's done this a number of times, and it is absolutely flagrantly improper. Every U.S. attorney prosecutor knows that when you make the press conference such as this, you stick to the four corners of the indictment. It's not just like a nice hygienic practice. It's completely connected to the fundamental innocence until proven guilty. So what she's done here is absolutely dirty him up with stuff that he's not even accused of in the indictment, and in the public eye now. Somehow, I have to imagine that this will be the subject both of a motion to dismiss and some kind of well, normally you would take this to Office of Professional Responsibility. That's been completely negated by this administration. So maybe a bar. I can't tell you how it makes my skin crawl, and that of, I think, any U.S. attorney, to see the Attorney General of the United States wander around outside the indictment, extol the president on this. It's really, really nauseating. Okay, now the resignation, where we found out all these details, it could well have been, maybe it'll turn out, that they go fishing for something. Obviously, it's politicized, and they want to change the subject from due process, where they're getting their heads handed to them, to his criminal conduct. All of that is already funky and political. But if they happen across a real crime, well, that happens in the criminal justice system, and that changes the subject. That this guy, Ben Schrader, resigned after 15 years. That couldn't be, it seems to me. We'll find out, though it's going to be hard. The honorable thing to do, but it's never been done, to my knowledge, by any criminal division chief until we get now to Bondi. This is the 8th, 9th resignation. It just doesn't happen. It's the ultimate that you do to protest. And it strikes me that it's likely that it's not simply, oh, you brought the whole political machinery of the United States to get this guy and get people off your back for knowingly sending him down without due process. There's gonna be a fight about what is the evidence in this case, whether the indictment is overstated. Have they charged a conspiracy that isn't quite there? By the way, all this stuff that she loads him up with seems to come from one cooperating witness who's doing time in Florida and is saying, I was the head of this sort of taxi service, and every once in a while I hired Abrego Garcia, which an far cry from $100,000 a year, full-time job. If what she said is not only outside the indictment, but a lie, that it's an impeachable offense. It honestly is. But the resignation really does speak volumes to anyone, any veteran of any U.S. attorney's office. If my criminal division chief had said, if you do this, I'll resign, it would have been the crisis of the decade within a U.S. attorney's office. So, been there 15 years, as you say, there must be some really strong principled objections to what they've done. And given that what they've done so serves their political purposes, and given their fast and loose relationship with the truth to date, my instinct, we're going to have to wait to see, but my instinct is they've been ultra squirrely, and now if that's true, they've screwed Abrego Garcia once and now screwed him again in order to get past the story of the first screwing. The whole thing is like, Kafka on steroids.
I want to be clear, right? We're not the Abrego Garcia fan club.
Right.
I don't know what this guy did or didn't do. I'm not here vouching for his personal behavior, but what I am vouching for is a process called due process that's in our Constitution, where there is an evidence-based way of proving your case and going through the steps to do it in the right way. And ultimately, where a case has a conclusion pursuant to that process, a person also has appeal rights, but we respect the process and we respect the outcome. And so the whole thing initially with Abrego Garcia is you can't just snatch people and disappear them and send them to concentration camps or however you want to define what CCOT is. It's a terrible place where people don't come out. So call it what you want, but sending them to El Salvador or to South Sudan or Libya, that's just not what our system is. Sorry, and you may think our system is slow and messy. So be it, but our system is one of due process. And yes, even people who are here, who aren't citizens, they also have a process that's well established. And so they have to have a hearing. So that's fine. You have a hearing. And then it's like you bring him back. And if you want to issue an indictment because you believe that crimes are created, it raises a red flag that back in 2022, he just gets off on a warning. And there are someone like that person in the criminal division was still working, at that time. These aren't politicized people. So you didn't do it in 2022. Now you want to indict him. Look, if you still are in the statute of limitations, if you've got evidence that crimes are committed, okay, I'm not upset. File the case, you get an indictment, all good. But then stop doing this extrajudicial crap as the attorney general and making up all these other things that aren't in the indictment and not just saying it alleged, saying that this is what it is. So then again, I'm like, you just made it worse. You wanted to bring him back. You want to indict him? Fine, do it. But then you do that press conference because, they're performing for Donald Trump and they're performing for.
She actually invokes his name, right? And by the way, remember what the story was? If we bring him back, we're going to deport him immediately. But they were so much in a hole and continuing to dig on everything they were doing with him. So like you, Ben, it sounded to me at first like, they totally turned the whole investigative apparatus on this one guy, and they did it for political reasons. But they found something, and if you find something, okay, it's, for them, a godsend, the subject changer, the snatching of victory from the jaws of defeat. If that hasn't happened, and what they actually did was bring a case that under the principles of prosecution, which is the Bible that people used to live by, that you can prove the case and the guy is really guilty, et cetera. If they didn't follow that process, if that's what Ben Schrader's resignation suggests, this is as bad as authoritarian governments get. That would be truly foul. And, now it's funny because an honorable person like Schrader will probably not talk. And yet, where there's going to be other people who were involved here, I think, and there'll be crosstalk and speculation. But the thing is, as if that's really what it is, it's as rotten as it gets.
Here's my prediction, and we'll come back and revisit it. The same way in New York with Mayor Adams, you had all those top people quit, and then it got kind of transferred over to Main Justice to deal with. My prediction, as we learn more about this, is, because Schrader was so respected in that Tennessee office, I think you're going to have trouble finding some of his proteges, because they're going to say, oh my God, if he's leaving, what's going to happen to my career? I just have a suspicion this goes back to Main Justice, and it's going to be handled, in a way that is atypical. And maybe we see those same two guys who keep doing all of these cases who are running around, Ensign or whatever the guy's name is. So we always say.
And let me just reinforce that point. Within an office, the U.S. attorney might be a fairly political person. Their first assistant is considered to be their person. The head of the criminal division is typically the most respected, the most seasoned, the most prudent, the most, absolutely by the book person. Guy like that resigns. And we're going to hear in the papers tomorrow, right, about what his peers say about him, et cetera. And, typically, even more than the resignation of a line prosecutor who has a case, this would be whoa, the chief of the criminal division. We have not heard the last of this, and I think it's going to get uglier before it gets prettier.
Keep you posted every step of the way. Everybody subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube channel, the Talking Feds Substack, and the Talking Feds podcast. Just search Talking Feds on those platforms. Harry runs those channels. It's where I get my legal news from, and you should too. Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, Ben.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.